everyone, this is Developer Jake and welcome back to another tutorial. In this video, I show you how to create a toggleable flashlight that is powered by batteries in Unity. Now, this scene that I have loaded up is my scene from the Backrooms Game Lab tutorial series, which shows you how to create your own Backrooms game. If you want to follow this tutorial to get this exact scene, it is linked in the description below, but it's also on the eye icon that has just showed up. But let's start creating the scripting for the flashlight. Now to do this, I'm going to come to my project window. I'll right click, go to create, and go to the top and press folder. I will call this folder the scripts folder. And then inside of this folder, I'll come and right click, press create, and go to my C# script. This will create a C# script, and we want to name it Flashlight Manager. Let's press enter, and then double click this script to open it up inside of our text editor. Inside of Flashlight Manager, I'm going to remove void start and void update because we won't be needing them. And now I'll insert private void update and private void lose battery. Lose battery will handle the loss of battery. I'm also going to have public void gain battery. And I'll have integer battery amount, or just amount as the parameter. This will handle the gaining of battery, as it is implied in the name. I'm going to come up to the top and I will say serialized field integer start battery. And I will put a tooltip before this that says this is the amount of battery that the player starts with. And I will say the start battery is equal to 100. Below this, I will create a new public integer current battery. And I will put a tooltip before this saying this is the amount of battery that the player currently has. Now I will create a new private void start function, and inside of here I'm going to say current battery equals start battery. This will set the current battery to the start battery when the game starts. Above this class, I'm going to create a new public enum called flashlight state. And inside of this enum, I'm going to have 3 states: off, on, and dead. The off state is called when the battery, or when the flashlight, is off. The on state will be called when the flashlight is on, and the dead state will be called when there is no battery left. We will have a new public flashlight state called the state. We will also have a new private bool for the flashlights is on. And before this, I will put a tooltip that says, is the flashlight on? And before this, I will put a tooltip that says, the current state of the flashlight. So I think this is about everything that we have to do. Oh, right, we should have a key that actually toggles the flashlight. So to create the key that will toggle the flashlight, I'm just going to say public or serialized field key code for the toggle key. And before this, I'll put a tooltip that says the key that is required to be pressed to turn on/off the flashlight. And for now, we're going to set this to be equal to keycode.f. And I am using the old input system of Unity. I'm not using the new input system of Unity. So if you need to change that, I would recommend changing it to the old input system, otherwise this code may not work. Below lose battery, I'm going to create a new method called toggle flashlight. And this will simply toggle the on/off state of the flashlight. Inside of void update, I'm going to say if input.getKey down toggle key, then we are going to toggle the flashlight. Toggles the flashlight. And then inside of toggle flashlight, I'm simply going to say flashlight is on equals exclamation mark, flashlight is on. And if the state equals a dead, flashlight state.dead, then we are going to say flashlight is on equals false. This will automatically overrides the state if there's no battery. Let's come up to the top of the script and let's create a new serialized field float for the battery loss tick, and let's set this to be equal to 0.5f. Before this, I'm going to put a range called 0.0f to 2f, and before this I'm going to put a tooltip that says the speed that the battery is lost at. Now let's go to start and let's say invoke repeating lose name of lose battery, comma 0, comma lose or battery loss tick, and let's put a semicolon at the end. This will loses the battery at a set interval of time, and this will forever repeat the battery loss function. Now let's come into lose battery. Because this is constantly repeating, we need to tell it to only function if the battery is on, so that it's not constantly losing battery even though the flashlight is off. To do this, I'm just going to say if state equals on and press tab, then we want to say current battery minus minus, and that just subtracts the battery by 1 if the flashlight is on. So there you have it. Now for gain battery, I want to say current battery plus equals amount, and this simply adds the amount of battery to the current battery. So if our current battery is 100 and our start battery is 100, meaning our maximum battery should be 100, and we try to add 5 to our current battery, then we're going to have 105, which is exploitable because you just have all kinds of batteries laying around, and the player could just keep going around gathering batteries, and then eventually they could have 200% battery, which isn't really what we want. We want to stop our player from getting infinite battery. Now to do this, I'm going to come before this statement here, and I'm going to call a new statement saying if current battery plus amount is greater than the start battery, then we're going to handle a new function here that just says current battery equals start battery, which will automatically cause the battery to be the maximum. Basically what this means is if the current battery is 99 and I try to add 5 to it, it will just automatically go to 100. And if the current battery is 75 and I try to add 100 to it, it will just automatically turn into 100. So it just stops the script from going above the current battery. I'll remove these because we don't need them. And right before this statement here, I'll put else. So now this is what our script in the gain battery should look like. Now let's handle some object references. To do this, I'm going to first of all create a new header before all of this and call these the options. And I'll come down right after this and call this the header for the references. Inside of references, I'm going to create a new serialized field game object for the flashlight's light. And before this, I'll create a tooltip that explains the fact that this is the lights that will be shown if the flash light is on. Inside of void update, I'm going to say if the state equals state.off, I'm going to say the flashlight light should be set active to false. I'm going to say else if the state is equal to on, then I'm going to say flashlight light dot set active true. And I'm going to say else if state equals dead, I'm going to say the flashlight lights should be set active equals to false, which automatically just stops the light from turning on if the flashlight is dead. And before this, I'll put handling the lights that will be shown. Now, to handle the battery actually being dead, I'm going to come below all of this and say handling the battery being dead. Under this, I will say if current battery is less than or equal to 0, I'll put an open curly bracket, close curly bracket. And inside of here, I'm just going to say current battery equals 0, and I will say that the state is equal to flashlight state dot dead. And this just basically kills the battery if it's a negative for some reason. And it will also stop the flashlight from being turned on if it's dead, and it will turn off the flashlight light if it is dead. However, if we gain a battery, then the current battery should turn back on. Now if our flashlight is dead and we get another battery, we want our flashlight to just automatically turn back on, just so that the player knows, hey, your flashlight is working again. Now to do this, I'm going to come into gain battery, and at the very top of this, I'm going to say if current battery equals 0, I will say the flashlight state should be equal to flashlight state dot on. Or I should probably, this is state right here. This state is equal to flashlight state dot on. And I will also say flashlight is on equals true, which will automatically turn the flashlight on. Now there is one more thing that we have to do inside of this right here, inside of the update function. Inside of current battery, the method that handles if the battery is dead, we want to say flashlight is on equals false, and this will just automatically turns the flashlight off, and which will prepare it for the toggle flashlight function. Now inside of the toggle flashlight function at the very bottom, we want to handle this, and we want to say if flashlight is on, state equals flashlight states dot on. And then this will basically turn the flashlight light on. And then we want to say else states equals off. Turns the flashlight light off. Now we are pretty much done here, but in case you want to handle your flashlight making a sound whenever it turns on or off, and it making one sound when you turn it on and another sound when you turn it off, I'll let you do that if you want to. So right above class here, right above public class, I will say require component type of audio source. And in references, we want to say serialized field audio clip for flashlight on FX and flashlights off FX. And these are the, I'll put a tooltip before this explaining that these are the sounds that will be played when the flashlight is toggled. Now inside of toggle flashlight, we just want to say, like right before this state here, I want to put an open curly bracket, and I want to put a closed curly bracket after it. I want to do the same for this one here. So now these two are inside of little curly brackets, just like that. So right about here, I want to say get components audio source dot play one shot flashlight on FX, and this will play the flashlight on sound. And then we want to just duplicate this line right about here, copy paste it over, and we want to change this to say flashlight off FX, plays the flashlight off sound. And this is pretty much it. Now I will explain what this does by saying turns or handles the lights slash sound that are seen slash heard when the player toggles the flashlight there. So this is our script complete. Now if you don't understand, why am I zooming out? What am I doing? This is our flashlight manager script complete. If you got lost anywhere, feel free to ask for help on my Discord server and we will help you out. And if you cannot do this for some reason because an error comes up that appears to be unsolvable, go ahead and go to my Patreon page and I will show you, or you can download the source code yourself. So now that we're done for Flashlight Manager, let's go back to Unity and we have one more script to complete. Let's right click inside of our scripts folder, press create, and press a new C# script. I want to call this script battery. I will double click this script to open it up inside of our Visual Studio or whatever other text editor you might have. And I just want to go ahead and delete all of this. Now inside of here, I just want to say serialized field int battery weight. And what this weight means is the battery that the player gains when they collect this. I'm also going to have a new, well, I'll put a header before this that says options, and I'll put a header after this that says references. Below the references header, I'll put a new serialized field that says game object hover object, and this will have a tooltip before it that says the object that is shown when the player hovers. And in case you want to have multiple, I'll enable handling for multiple hover objects by just putting a square bracket here and a closed square bracket there. Inside of our options, I want to create a new serialized field that says the key code for the collect key, and I'll set this to be keycode.e. And before this, I will say this is the key that needs to be pressed to collect this battery, if I can spell. Alright, let's go down before references, and I just want to say public void on mouse over, which is a Unity function that is automatically called. And I want to create a new public void on mouse exit. Now inside of on mouse exit, I just want to say for each game object obj, as in object, in hover object obj dot set active equal to false. This just basically hides the hover object. Easy as that. So I guess I'll put a little explanation here that says hides the hover object. And on mouse hover, I want to say if input.getKey down, collect key, then I want to say find object of type flashlight manager dot gain battery weight, adds the battery weight to the flashlight manager. Below this, I want to say this dot game object. Sorry. And now that we've so what this will do basically is when the player is hovering over the battery and when they press the collect key, then the flashlight will gain the battery. And when they look away from it, then the hover object should set active to false. Of course, we will need to actually turn this on. To do this, I'm just going to copy this line here and paste it at the very beginning of this. And I will say true instead of false. Shows the hover object. Now the last thing we're going to have to do inside of this battery script here, unless you want to add an audio source, you can do that yourself. Inside of this if statement here, I want to say destroy this dot game object. And this will just destroy the battery game object from the scene when you collect it. I guess I could put that in. Destroys, hides the battery game object from the scene when the player collects it. Now before we leave the flashlight manager, there is one more thing that we have to do. Right before both of these, we have to write a simple statement that says if flashlight on fx exclamation mark null, then it will play this. And for the other one, I want to say flashlight off fx exclamation mark equals null. This basically means that it is now optional about whether or not you want to assign this object. It will not crash your game or crash your Unity, whatever, if you don't have the flashlight sound. So basically, you can add the sound if you want. You don't have to add it if you don't want to. It's up to you now. Now that we've done that, we are done with scripting. Let's hop back over to Unity and wait for our scripts to compile. And when they finish compiling, we're going to do a few last things to wrap up in Unity. So what we're going to do is create a battery and a flashlight. The battery will be hooked up to our battery script and the flashlight will be hooked up to our flashlight script. Now let's start simple here. Let's create a battery. To do this, I'm going to press this plus icon here. I'm going to press create empty. Then I'm going to find this object in my scene by just giving it a little icon for now. And then I will drag it up a bit. And then I will press F just to zoom in on it. Now I'll take away the icons now that I've found it. I will rename this object to say battery. And on it, I will press add component and add the battery components that we just coded. Next, we're going to have to add a little battery model onto it so that we can actually see the battery in the scene. To add the battery model, I'm going to right click on battery, come down to create empty, and then it should have a new game object here. I will rename this to say battery model. And inside of battery model, for now, I'll just put a 3D object cube. Of course, you can add whatever model you want from the asset store over here, but I'm just going to be adding a cube. I will scale it to look like a battery. It doesn't really matter for me. However, again, you may want to actually add a cube, or a battery from the asset store. You can put a battery from the asset store in here as long as it is inside of the battery model object. I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder here just called materials, adding my own material here, battery. Here we go. I'll drag this on here onto my cube, and then I will give it a little bit of glow, make it greenish just so that you can really see it in the scene tab. And I think this should be about fine. Of course, I do have some post-processing that is kind of interrupting here. I'll give it a little green color, and there we go. There's my battery. Now, this is what's actually going to be viewable, but we also want to have our hover object that shows whenever we hover over our battery. So I want to go ahead into battery, press create empty, rename this to battery hover. And inside of here, I will just, I'll create a new cube. And I will make this smaller. Of course, you might want to go on the asset store and maybe add something with a mask or some kind of outline. There are things on the asset store for free that offer outlines. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to be adding a cube. I'll duplicate this material here and I'll add it to my cube inside of this right here, or inside of the battery hover. I will make my cube white. And then that should be enough. I'll rename this to say that's hover, just hover. And that's all I'm going to do here. So when you look at it, this turns on and off. Of course, you may want to also add a canvas that says E or something on the screen when you look at it, but that is up to you, completely up to you. I'll now click on the battery object and I will drag my battery hover over to the hover object. And then I will change the battery weight to be 25. This battery weight is the amount of battery that the player gains when they collect the battery. So when they hover over the object and press E, in my case it's E, then they will gain 25 battery to their flashlight. Now you can change this to be as high or as small as you want. It is up to you. Now I'm going to come back over to I'm going to come out of this and I'm going to come out to my root folder here. I'm going to create a new folder inside of my assets tab called the Prefabs. Now before we make our battery into a prefab, there's one last thing we have to do. After we've clicked on battery, let's just. Now the last thing that we have to do is come to our battery here, press add component, type in box collider and press the one that shows up. And then we have a collider. This is basically, oh my gosh. This is basically going to be the hitbox of our battery. So when the player is looking at this collider here, that is when they're going to be able to interact with our battery. Now I want this collider to actually be reasonable. So I'm going to press these three dots right here next to edit collider. And I'm going to shape this to be a good distance around my battery. So I'm going to play with this until I get my collider to be exactly where I want it to be. This collider is going to be the hitbox that the player looks at in order to pick it up. So it's important that we make it as big or as small as we need it to be in order for it to actually be viewable by the player. And I think that's about good. So now that we have a hitbox, I'm going to come to my assets tab and I'm going to create a new folder here called a prefab folder. Inside of my prefabs folder, I'm going to drag my battery object into it. This will cause my battery to appear green, or to appear blue. This means that it is now a prefab, and if we drag this battery from the prefabs window into our scene window, you'll see that we can drag a virtually infinite amount of these into our scene window, and it will just continue creating batteries. This means that we can now put these wherever we want inside of our game, and we'll just always have a lot of batteries that we can put around. Now this is our battery system complete. Now that we have done that, we're going to have to create a flashlight. Now to create a flashlight, I already have an FPS controller here in my scene, but you might not have an FPS controller. If you want this exact FPS controller, head over to the Backrooms Game Lab and I'll show you how to create this scene as well as the FPS controller into your scene. But if you don't have an FPS controller, I don't know how you're going to follow this part. So if you do have an FPS controller in the scene, I'm going to go ahead and add my game tab down here so we can see what we're doing. And I'll put it to where I want it to be. Just over here. Unity, come on. There we go. Just like that. Now that we have a game tab, I will now be able to see the flashlight object that we're going to be placing around. Because ideally, we want our flashlight to show up inside of our we want the player to look like they're holding the flashlight, right? So to do this, I'm actually going to head over to the asset store and get a flashlight model that I had thought was a pretty nice flashlight model. So this flashlight model is linked in the description below. So you just follow that first link in the description below and you can grab this model from the asset store. And this is completely free, so I'll go ahead and press open in Unity. Now that it is over here, I will press download, and then it will start downloading the asset. When it's finished downloading, we're just going to go ahead and press import. Then a window should pop up. Let's press import again, and inside of Unity, it will start importing an asset into our scene. This will add a new folder called flashlight to our assets tab here. Go ahead and click on flashlight and we'll see a few folders here. One called flashlight gold, one called misc, model, and textures. Let's go into flashlight gold and we should see two flashlight models here. I'm going to go ahead and drag in the flashlight color model. Now inside of here, you will, if by chance your flashlight appears to be purple, we can easily fix that. What we're going to do is we're going to come to our materials folder here, and we're going to click this here, this first material, and come to the top, press edit, go all the way down to the bottom, press rendering, go to materials, and press convert, then press proceed. And then as you'll see, one of our flashlights are fixed. Again, this is only for if your flashlight appears purple. You'll see also in the front of our flashlight, we also have a weird sort of purplish thing happening to it. To fix this, I'll just click on the flashlight, then I'll go down to these materials here, and I'll right click one of them, and just press select material to locate where it is. Now what I'm going to do is I will select all of the purple materials, go up to edit, and I'll come down to rendering. Then I'll go to materials and press convert. Then I'll press proceed. This should fix all of our broken materials. The reason why that happened was because you may have been using the Unity render pipeline, in which apparently all the materials that you import from the asset store are broken. Thanks Unity. So now that we have this flashlight model, everything else is going to be pretty simple. Let's first of all right click this, go down to Prefab and press unpack completely so that we can change this around. Then we're going to come into FPS controller, right click it, create a new empty object and call this the flashlight. I'm actually going to drag this into my camera so that it will rotate around with my camera. I'm going to drag my flashlight color into the flashlight object, and I'm going to position it at 0, 0, 0. Next, if I come into my flashlight object here, I will press add component and type in flashlight manager. An audio source will automatically be assigned to this, but because it's a little bit in the way here, I'm going to right click this and press move down, because it's in the way and it's really big, so it's just best that we have this on the bottom of our flashlight manager. As you can see, we have all of our parameters that we just coded in the Visual Studio. We see our battery loss tick, the speed that the battery is lost at. We see our start battery, the amount of battery that the player starts with, as well as all kinds of other stuff. So the first thing that we really need to do, and really the only thing we have to do, is come to our flashlight color, or come to our flashlight that is, and then kind of position this to where we want it to be. So I want this to be in my game view, right next to where the player's hand is. So to do this, I'm going to kind of rotate it to be right next to the camera. Again, everyone is going to have a different thing that they have to do here, but as you can see in my game tab, it's kind of being moved over closer to my camera. Now if I move it more over here, rotate it in a little bit, maybe make it a little bit bigger. As you can see, now we have a flashlight. And there we go. So the last thing we have to do is assign our flashlight light. This is the light that will be shown in the game view. To do this, I'll come over to flashlight color, assign the yellow light, and I will drag it over to this. I'm also going to do a little thing on my side by making this, I'm going to make this light a little bit stronger. To make this light stronger, I'm just going to click on yellow light, change the range, change the intensity, and change the spot angle, just like that. Now as you can see, it's bigger, and therefore it can be seen better. For those of you that want audio assigned to your flashlight, all you have to do is import the audio asset into here, and then drag the audio clip into here and here, and then that will play the sound when the flashlight is toggled. So let's hop into our game, and we should see that everything appears to be working. When this finishes compiling, for Pete's sakes. So in our game, the first thing we see is our flashlight that's being held by our player, and if we move around, because my flashlight is a child object of the camera, we see that our flashlight goes with us. Our flashlight starts off, but when we press F, you'll see our flashlight turns on, and we can turn it off and on and toggle between it just like that. You'll see also inside of our inspector tab, our flashlight's battery is draining, but this only happens when we have our flashlight on. As our flashlight slowly begins to drain in the inspector window, as we can see it starts to get smaller and smaller in battery percentage, it will begin to drip down to 0. And when it drifts down to 0, it will die. The state will go down to dead, and the flashlight will automatically turn off. It will no longer go beyond 0 because we didn't let it. So to fix our battery to give our flashlight more battery, we just go over to one of our batteries. These guys, they show a little hover icon when you look at them, and when you press E, it collects, and then it will automatically turn our flashlight on. Now, as you can see over here, every time you collect a battery, you'll get more current battery. But when we get to 94, our battery wants to give us 25 battery, but we don't want it to exceed 100 since that's our start battery. Because of this, it will just automatically default it to 25 no matter how much battery you're trying to give it. Everything else is pretty self-explanatory. Our battery loss is the speed at which our battery is drained out. And our toggle key can be changed. So let's say I want my toggle key to be Q instead. Well, I just set it to be Q, and now when I press Q, my light turns on and off. And if I change it back to F, which is the one that is more preferred, as you can see when I press F, my light turns on. But that's about all I've got time for today. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial where I showed you how to create your own flashlight that is battery powered. And if you do want to use this scene that I'm using right here, this is a backroom scene which has locked doors, normal doors, and flickering lights, and a backrooms map. Consider following my beginner-friendly Backrooms Game Lab tutorial series where I show you how to create this with entities, jump scares, and a whole lot more. But again, that's about all I've got time for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we will see you in the next one.